Hi, welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches. I'm Pete McConville, and this is my hot take on the new Bell & Ross BR03 93 GMT New, or the St Kilda version. I'll explain why the Saints version later. This is a watch I really like. I don't love, but I'm actually kind of glad Bell & Ross made it this way, even though I don't love it and wouldn't buy this watch. I'll explain why. So welcome to my hot take on the new Bell & Ross BR03 93 New, or as I'm going to call it, the Saints. Why the Saints? Because red, white and black is the colour scheme of the St Kilda Saints, a team in the AFL, the Australian Football League, which I follow, and red, white and black is just naturally always going to be the Saints. As I said in the intro, this is a watch I kind of like, can't love, but I'm happier made. Let me walk through each of these. Why do I like it? I like it because it shares the bones with a watch I do truly love, and that is the previous BR0393 GMT, or as I'm going to call it, the Pure. It is a pure instrument watch. It's got no colorings. It's basically just steel, white, orange hand on a black dial. Beautiful, clean, pure, and just all in all wonderful. The case design, the case finishing, the case execution, the styling of the bezel, the styling of the dial, the numerals, everything is just as close to perfect as I have ever actually touched on that watch. I love it to bits. And all of those bones, I left out the date implementation, which is possibly one of the greatest date implementations on any watch other than say a big date. So all of that is just magnificent. Unfortunately, in making the leap to the new St Kilda version, Bell & Ross have kind of compromised some of the things I like, principally by giving it a rotating bezel. That rotating bezel has to be thicker. They've then combined that with a sloping chapter ring, which adds more numbers, which has got the added effect of then shrinking the apparent size of the dial. So what we end up with is more going on in a more confined, more constrained space. And for me, the new watch just looks too busy, too fussy. It doesn't have the clarity, the word I've used a couple of times, purity, that the previous one had. And for me, that fussiness, that kind of overburdening of detail kind of detracts from the whole watch, and I find myself preferring the old one. Okay, so that's why I like it but don't love it. But why am I glad it's made? Okay, I'm glad it's made, and I want to tip my hat and say chapeau to the designers for having the courage to go with what is one of the single most common color schemes in all the world, despite knowing that within our little community where people are so insular, they are going to be accused of knocking off a Rolex. That's the problem of our community. So many people don't look outside that they kind of lose track of reality. One of the most ironic things to me of all is that when naming the Rolex with the black and red bezel, we will name it after another product, i.e. Coke, but then somehow attribute the ownership of those colors to Rolex, despite the fact that Rolex themselves have obviously borrowed that from the wider world. And that's kind of really not uncommon, because red, white and black, as I've said before, whether it's cars or sporting teams, is a super common sports instrumentation, male, sexy, this is a color scheme we like set of things. Now, having said all of that, it is inevitable that the Bell & Ross designers aren't idiots. They would have known that people would make this comparison. They would have known that they would be accused of knocking off the Rolex GMT Coke as soon as they went for the ubiquitous red, white and black color scheme. And yet they had the courage to proceed. They didn't collapse under the weight of what Harold Bloom would call the anxiety of influence, where people become so terrified of other people's beliefs and expectations of what will be leveled at them, that they shrink in on themselves. They make dumb decisions. They don't make the best decision they can for their product, because they're so afraid that they've been overly influenced by something else. I love that the Bell & Ross designers had the strength, had the fortitude to say, this is the color scheme that we want. We know full well what people are going to say, and you know what? Screw you, we don't care. And I think that's a hugely admirable thing, which is why, even though I don't love this watch, I don't love the color scheme, I don't love that they even went to a color scheme at all, I'm secretly kind of glad they did, because it just shows a strength in the design team that means that even though this watch isn't for me, I'm more confident that there will be Bell & Rosses I might be interested in later. So that's my take on this watch. As I've said a couple of times, I loved the predecessor. I think the predecessor of this watch is one of the great watches ever made. I don't love the way it's gone and the compromises they've had to make to put that rotating bezel in. However, I'm kind of glad they went the way they did with that red, white and black color scheme. I think that it showed a real strength and made me feel better about Bell & Ross as a brand for what they did. I strongly suspect many of you will disagree with me vehemently in the comments below. That's okay. This is the internet. You are all perfectly entitled to be wrong. No action will be taken against you. Leave the comments down below anyway. I look forward to reading them. See you later.